A dissertation, how a professional editor finds and fixes problems. I'm Dr. Scott, and the topic today is going to be, if writing isn't my area of expertise, how do I comment on writing, on where and how to comment? So this is a pre-course presentation. Uh, we have another video that's going to go in detail on the content of the feedback. So this is really preliminary information that we're going to present here. So on where to comment and how to comment. So step one, where to comment. There are two types of comments. So summative comments and formative comments that I'm going to talk about. So summative comments. The best place to put summative comments in written feedback is in the beginning of a paper, and this is especially so for a prospectus or a dissertation that's very lengthy. The student will have easy access to this feedback. It's in the beginning of the paper, and that's the most important thing, is that the student gets the feedback that you're providing. Recommend highlighting your feedback in a bright color, typically like a red. This again will make it stand out and make sure that the student actually reads the feedback you're providing. And then we recommend referring to your student by name, and this is personalizing your feedback. It goes to again, having them read your feedback and then be receptive to the feedback you're providing. So it's important that you personalize that information. So we usually recommend that you make one important comment about their writing. And now this certainly could be on the content itself, but typically you'd make some sort of comment at the beginning of the summative comment that just summarizes what you're seeing in their writing. Again, this could be on the content. It also could be on formatting. It could be on their the actual grammar, etc. But the important piece here is that you're giving them sort of a take-home message in that one important comment about their writing. Now, depending on the purpose of the paper, it's important to summarize the purpose of the paper so they just it's reiterated to them. Now, obviously, if it's an iterative type of document, such as a prospectus or a proposal, in the sense that it's been reviewed and you provided feedback multiple times, obviously this summarizing the purpose is not necessary. However, even in those cases, it's important to at least kind of summarize where they're at in the progress of that review, and just kind of give them sort of a summary of what that purpose is. You do want to indicate that you provided bubble comments, and these are the formative comments that I'll talk about. And it's important that you're putting it in the summative comment that yes, indeed, you did provide bubble comments, and they're in the right margin. Again, to make sure that they read them, or at least can locate them, and then hopefully read them to get the feedback that you provided. It's also important to encourage them to keep pushing forward, especially for dissertation students, doctoral students. They're constantly being challenged with motivation to keep pushing forward. And I think this again, not just with the personalizing of your comments, but giving them encouragement is going to go a long way for them to be receptive to the feedback that you provide, and of course, keep pushing forward and improving in their writing skills. And then sign off. This is important. Just put your name at the end so that they know who this feedback came from. And again, this is important for iterative documents like, again, the prospectus of the proposal, where there might be 2 or 3 or 4, etc. Committee members that are providing feedback in the beginning of the document. Putting your name differentiates the feedback from the others that have provided it. Okay, formative comments. So there's a review tab in Microsoft Word that you would click on New Comment, and this is to provide that bubble comment I mentioned. You're going to provide that bubble comment wherever there's need to provide feedback on formatting or their grammar and writing in general. Now, typically, you would you place the cursor somewhere in the text and then click on that new comment, and that would put the comment attached to where the cursor's at. Make sure your name shows up in the bubble comment. This is important in that you want to make sure that the student knows who the author of the comment is, and sometimes Microsoft Word defaults to a name such as author, and you want to be able to differentiate your feedback from, let's say, other committee members that provided bubble comments as well. So there's a feature in Microsoft Word where you can actually change the name of the author for bubble comments. So I encourage you to do that. Make sure it has your name and possibly your title as well. So it's important, obviously, to provide feedback, but try to keep it brief. With the formative comments, really, these are providing comments in bubble comments throughout the paper. They're focused on specific areas for improvement. You want to keep it brief. We typically recommend no more than 3 to 5 sentences of feedback so they can make it concise, they can read it, they can see the information that's needed and move right to the next step. If you're providing paragraphs length of feedback, the student will be less likely to actually read that information and comprehend and implement the changes. So if you can make it more brief, to the point, and provide some recommendations to improve in that area and how to improve, then they're going to be more likely to be receptive and, of course, implement the changes. So how to comment. So in terms of the actual feedback, when you provide this feedback, you do not need to address every instance in these formative comments. So if you start seeing that they're making errors in formatting, they're systemic errors, they're making errors over and over again, you can just highlight the first instance of that error and then just state that this is an error that you're seeing, and that you're leaving it up to them to kind of review the document and correct the systemic error that you're seeing for formatting or for grammar. So this puts a little bit more responsibility on the student, and it's much more effective rather than highlighting every single instance. Now, if there's only a few instances, certainly you'd want to bring those to their attention. But if you see, half a dozen or more of this over and over again systemic error, then there's no need for you to keep going through and making those feedback. Provide suggestions on how to correct the error. So it's not just a matter of identifying that there's an error, but you want to say, okay, let's say there was an error in formatting a citation. Okay, well, how should they go about correcting that? And you can maybe highlight that, okay, you forgot an ampersand, or you forgot a comma somewhere in the citation. And give them specific feedback on what that looks like. Maybe even give an example, and maybe even give them a link that they can go to review some feedback on how to improve that area. But again, it's not just a matter of saying, hey, you made this error, but also providing suggestions on how to correct the error. Using encouraging or supportive language. Again, this is important for the sake of the student being receptive to the feedback and actually making the changes based on the feedback. And also, the consider revising language is important for a couple of reasons. Now certainly with grammar, it's very straightforward. But for example, in formatting errors, perhaps that you have a different version than the student has. That the version for the APA style, for example, the APA style guide. And the consider revising kind of leaves the door open for some dialogue with them to kind of sort out, okay, this is the recommendation for the change, for them to go back to the style guide and research and figure out, okay, that's what I need to do to change it. And perhaps maybe, make sure you're on the same page. Maybe you have an older version, they have the newer version, or vice versa. And this opens that dialogue without being definitive. Really puts the responsibility on the student to make sure it's correct and implement the change. And then providing resources that the student can use to improve. So again, this would be links to writing centers and external sources. This is all important as you're providing suggestions on how to correct errors, because then they can go and get those resources to improve in those categories. Okay, so some recommended resources. So Edit 911 has how to edit a scholarly article thesis or dissertation. That's a good resource you can utilize. And then feedback, there are many different sources online you can go to. Faculty Focus actually has a pretty good resource you can utilize on providing some feedback to students. But the key here is to be aware what you need to, or rather how you need to go about providing that feedback, and then be consistent throughout the process. Well, thank you for watching this presentation. For any questions you might have, please reach out to Edit 911. We can provide support and feedback and help you with your editing needs. Thank you.